Hey everyone. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you more stories just like this one. Alright, let's get started. People sometimes ask me why I left Kansas after nearly 2 decades of farm work. They think it was the endless hours, the cattle prices, or the way winter gets into your bones out here until the cold lives in your joints. But the truth is, it wasn't the work that broke me. It was one October night in 2021 when I realized I wasn't safe anymore, not from strangers, but from the people I thought I understood best. I was 36 that fall. Divorced, no kids, just me and the land. I worked for the Callahan family on their 700-acre spread outside Willow County. A town so small you could drive past it while reaching for your cup of coffee and never realize you'd missed anything. The population hovered around 2,500, and most of those last names matched the ones out in the cemetery, chiseled in granite, fading under the weather but still there long after the living moved on. My place sat on the southern edge of the Callahan property, a 2-bedroom house included as part of the job. The roof whined in the wind. The back door stuck in summer and rattled in winter. But the porch faced east, and every morning I could sit there with a chipped mug of coffee while the sun climbed over the corn, flooding the fields with light, turning everything gold. The Callahans were good people. Patrick Callahan had hands like shovel blades and a voice that could steer cattle, but he never raised it at his wife or his kids. His wife Nora always made an extra casserole when she knew I'd be too tired after a long day to cook. Their boys, Connor and Eli, were built like fence posts and had that quiet decency you only learn doing chores beside your parents year after year. I kept their fences tight, their cattle fed, and their machinery running. In return, they gave me dignity, a paycheck that showed up when it was supposed to, and a place where my name meant something. The trouble didn't start with the Callahans. It started at the Morton's place, a couple of 100 acres that bordered our northeast pasture. James Morton was close to 60, thin as a garden rake, and wore the same sun-split ball cap every day until the brim frayed apart. His wife, Miriam, had been the kind of woman who brought pies to church potlucks and showed up with soup when anyone was sick. Cancer took her fast. After that, the house lost its color. The curtains stayed drawn. The porch swing stopped moving. And Lydia kept spiraling. Lydia was 27 in 2021. In high school, she'd been homecoming queen, all bright eyes and quick smiles, choir solos and softball trophies. That's what people said anyway. How she glowed on Friday nights and sang the national anthem like a promise. I didn't know her then. By the time I met her, the shine was already gone. At first it was a bad boyfriend, then a worse crowd. Pills became powder, powder became shards, and by the summer before that October, meth had carved her down to the bones and nerves. She came around my place sometimes. The first few times, it was just simple requests. Can I borrow your phone? Got $20 until Friday? Could you give me a ride to the station? She'd talk fast, hands scratching at the sores blooming under her sleeves, eyes flicking to the door like she expected someone to burst in at any second. Saying no only meant she'd be back later, louder, maybe throwing gravel at my bedroom window until I gave in. I set boundaries. I said things like, I'll help once, but this can't be a habit, and you need to talk to your dad, and you should see Pastor Cole, he knows a program in Salina. Each time, she nodded, promised, disappeared, and then returned like a storm that didn't care what fences you'd built since last time. The town had its own opinions. At Millie's Diner, where you could buy a meatloaf the size of your forearm and a slice of pie, sugar sharp enough to keep you awake through calving season, the regulars kept their theories ready. Some said James was too soft on her. Some said he was too hard. Some said she'd been ruined by grief. Others by boredom. Everyone agreed that drugs did to your brain what drought did to a pasture. Stripped it bare and left dust where there used to be life. Late that summer, I ran into Lydia at the Sinclair station. I was topping off the diesel tank for the skid steer when she came pacing out of the store wearing a jacket too big for her, the sleeves swallowing her hands. It was 90 degrees. Sweat darkened the collar, and she kept twisting in circles, murmuring into a dead phone, pressing buttons on a cracked screen like she was dialing a number that wasn't there. The clerk, a college kid home for break, watched her the way you watch a stray dog, half pity, half fear. She didn't see me, or if she did, she didn't want to. There were other small signs. The Mortons' 2 German shepherds, Duke and Dolly, used to bark loud enough to shake their chain when a car passed. By late September, they'd gone quiet, lethargic, ribs showing. I offered James a bag of feed, and he took it like he was ashamed of the weight. like it meant something worse than it did. His yard, once clipped and neat under Miriam's care, grew ragged. The porch light began to burn all day and all night, as if he'd forgotten it was on or couldn't sleep without a little island of brightness against the dark. Then came Sunday, the first one in October, warm enough to make you believe summer wasn't done with us yet. I spent the morning repairing a section of fence the bulls had busted through. By noon, I was at the Save-A-Lot in town picking up coffee, Band-Aids, a sack of flour, and engine oil. Eleanor, the cashier, leaned across her register as always when she had news. "Saw Lydia this morning," she said, lowering her voice, even though the closest shopper was a kid staring at a rack of candy like it was a museum. She looked rough, pacing by the gas pumps, muttering. "That green jacket again, sweating like a glass of tea." I said something non-committal about the weather. Eleanor rolled her eyes. "It ain't the weather." When I got back to the farm, the sun was already tipping west, pouring thick orange light over the fields. A wind picked up from the north, dry and papery, setting the standing corn to whispering. The hounds at the Morton's place didn't bark. The quiet made the hair on my arms rise. I was in the barn around 8:30, bent over a Holstein calf with a hoof infection. The sour smell of rot and iodine fighting in the air. The radio was off. I like hearing animals breathe when I work. It tells me what I can't see. Somewhere beyond the open door, a night insect buzzed against metal with a sound like a bad fuse. Then I heard footsteps on the gravel, close, irregular, a stutter of weight and drag. The barn door scraped open, and Lydia stood there. Even before my brain sorted the details, my body knew something was wrong. Her pupils were wide enough to swallow the iris, turning her eyes bottomless. Sweat slicked her brow, matting hair to her forehead, though the air was dropping toward 50. She wore that same green jacket Eleanor had mentioned. Under the fluorescent lights, dark stains tracked along the sleeves and chest. Not fresh red, old, oxidized, almost brown. Dried. The metallic smell hit me next, dense and thick, nothing like the honest blood of calving. This was domestic. Wrong. The scent of something violent carried indoors and then back out again. "I need your truck," she said. "Not a request, a verdict. And I need $500. Right now." "No, you don't," I said, too soft, too calm. Like maybe tone could change the facts standing in front of me. "What happened?" "They're coming," she said, turning a slow circle. Head cocked as if listening to a station I couldn't hear. "I can hear their radios. Listen." She paused, breath hitching. "Can't you hear them?" All I heard was the calf heaving and the old barn frame moving in the wind like a ship at anchor. She stumbled deeper inside, sneakers leaving faint reddish smears on the concrete. She reached for the tool rack, pulled down a length of rope and a pair of wire cutters, turned them over in her hands like she couldn't remember what they were for, then dropped both and flinched as they clattered. I took a small step toward the wall where the halters hung. Anything to put space between us and to give me something to hold if this went bad. "Lydia," I said, "where's your dad?" She stared past me toward the dark outside, head shaking in small jerky motions. "He had an accident," she said finally, drawing the word out like it burned her mouth. "In the kitchen. Slipped. Hit his head. Then we need to call an ambulance." She moved faster than I expected, grabbing my wrist with both hands. The strength in her grip startled me. It felt like a vice clamping down. Her nails dug crescent moons into my skin. "No ambulance," she hissed. "Just the truck. I'll go to Colorado. I got people there. They'll fix it." The way she said fix, the way she dragged the word across her teeth, made my stomach drop through the floor. I slid my wrist free as gently as I could and stepped back. "I don't have $500 on me." Her laugh was not a laugh at all, just a torn sound escaping her throat. "You don't get it," she said. "We don't have time." Outside, far off, a siren lifted into the air. One voice, then another, the sound bending as it came over the hills. Lydia went rigid. The tendons in her neck stood out. She turned toward the door. The motion light over the yard tripped on, flooding her in a deliberate white glow that made the stains on her jacket bloom to purple-black shadows. "You were always kind," she said, not looking back at me, even when everyone else crossed the street. Her voice softened. "Remember when you fixed my radiator? That winter it cracked." I did. She showed up shaking in January, breath smoky, fingers white around a steering wheel. I patched the radiator with a kit and a prayer and sent her home with my spare gloves. Back then, her eyes still found mine and stayed there long enough to say thank you. She bolted through the door and across the yard, not toward the road, toward the corn. The dry stalk swallowed her up, rustling like brittle paper, the sound carrying for 30 seconds, maybe less, before it faded into the wind. I stood there too long, my body slow to catch up to the fact that it was already over. Then I stepped outside and saw the glow to the north and east, red and blue flickering off the thin cloud cover like lightning from a distant storm. First one cruiser, then another, an ambulance. Headlights moving down the Morton's Drive, sirens cut, tires whispering on gravel. I locked my door that night for the first time since moving in. It felt ceremonial in a way that made me uneasy, like admitting something you'd been pretending not to know. From my kitchen window, I watched beams of flashlight cut the yard next door into pieces. Officers moved like cautious ghosts. No shouting, just the steady heartbeat of radio chatter I couldn't parse. One beam swung toward the field where Lydia had run. It hovered for a long time. Around midnight, 3 knocks hit my front door. Firm, spaced like training. I jolted even though I'd been expecting it. 2 deputies stood on my porch. The taller one had a calm face and a square jaw. He probably hated shaving. His name tag read Grant. The younger man behind him couldn't stop glancing toward the Morton's place. "Evening," Grant said. "We're looking for Lydia Morton. Neighbors saw someone run this way earlier. Have you seen her?" I told them everything. The jacket, the stains, the request for my truck, the way she'd run into the corn at the sound of sirens. Grant wrote notes in a small spiral pad, printing each letter like it might be evidence someday. The younger deputy kept his eyes on the red-blue pulse over the trees. "Sir," Grant said when I finished, "we're going to need you to stay inside tonight. Lock up. If she comes back, don't let her in. Call us." "What's going on?" I asked, even though I already knew. The younger deputy's voice came out hoarse, like the answer scuffed his throat on the way up. "James Morton is dead," he said, shot with his own rifle. The words didn't land all at once. They arrived in pieces. James, dead, rifle, and then assembled into a truth that fit too well with the smell on Lydia's jacket. They found her the next morning, 7 miles away, barefoot on County Road 12. A farmer named Briggs calling it in when she stepped into the lane, as if the double yellow lines were a sidewalk. She didn't fight when they cuffed her. She asked, quiet as rain, if they could stop at McDonald's on the way because she hadn't eaten in 3 days. They didn't stop. The story unspooled over weeks in court filings, in gossip, in little square photos above headlines in the Willow County Herald. Sleep deprivation had stacked on top of everything else until it knocked out the last support beam in her mind. She became convinced James was poisoning her food, installing cameras behind the heat registers, turning her into the feds. She took his Winchester Model 70 from the garage and waited by the back door. When he came in from checking the beans, she fired once into his chest. It didn't kill him right away. He crawled, leaving a smear on the kitchen linoleum, toward the hallway phone they never got around to replacing with a cordless. She followed and broke him with the rifle butt. The coroner said 20 minutes, more or less from first shot to stillness. The trial lasted barely a week. I sat outside the courtroom the first morning with my hat in my hands, and my stomach pitched like I was about to go up in a small plane. Inside, the room smelled like furniture polish and old paper, like every courthouse in America. Lydia came in wearing orange and chains. Jail had softened the angles that the drugs had carved. She'd put on weight, and her eyes were clear in a way I hadn't seen in years. When the prosecutor asked me to describe her that night in my barn, I looked at Lydia, and she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, permission or surrender. I still don't know. Her public defender called 2 experts who talked about stimulant psychosis, how 4 days without sleep can peel your brain away from the world, how paranoia becomes the only logic that makes sense. The jury listened the way Plains people listen to the weather, respectfully, but without any expectation that they can change it. When they filed out to deliberate, Aunt Nancy James's sister sat in the back pew with a handkerchief embroidered with blue flowers and didn't meet anyone's eyes. It took the jury 4 hours. Guilty. Second-degree murder. 25 to life. When the judge asked if there was anything anyone wanted to say before sentencing, Lydia stared at her folded hands and said nothing at all. You'd think the town would have had something to say, but mostly people went quiet in that way that looks like respect, but is part fear, part exhaustion. We're good at silence out here. It's how we make it through storms, by waiting them out. 2 months after the trial ended, I told the Callahans I was leaving. I didn't want to drive past the Morton's place and see the yellow tape slack in the wind like a ribbon the county forgot. I didn't want to smell soybeans sweet rotting in the field, because no one brought them in. I didn't want to stand in my barn at night and hear wind rattling tin and wonder if the next set of footsteps wouldn't run, but come closer instead. The Callahans didn't try to talk me out of it. Patrick shook my hand with both of his and said, "A man knows when a place has done all it can for him." Nora pressed a casserole into my arms the size of a suitcase. Connor and Eli helped me load a trailer with everything I owned that wouldn't fit in the bed of my truck. It didn't take long. Before I left, I drove one last time up the Morton's Lane. The sheriff's department had taken down the tape, but the porch light was still on, somehow, burned out to a yellow nub that barely pushed the dark off the steps. The two shepherds had been rehomed by then. The yard was silent. Through the kitchen window I could see a square cut out of the linoleum, where the blood wouldn't come up, no matter how hard they scrubbed. Somebody had nailed plywood over it, like sorrow could be tidied if you covered it with enough clean boards. The detective Grant, after the verdict, told me something that stuck. They'd found a scrap of paper in Lydia's pocket, folded tight and damp from sweat. My name was on it. There were 4 others I didn't recognize. When I asked what it meant, he shrugged a little, as if his shoulders hurt. "We'll probably never know," he said. I drove west until the geography changed the way the sky sits on it. The land climbed enough to show you the shoulders of stone and scraps of forest where the wind sounded different. I landed outside Sheridan, Wyoming, working nights on a ranch too big to see end to end. The stars there looked like ice thrown across black glass, and the air tasted like pine and iron. No one knew my name. That's what I wanted. But leaving a place isn't the same as leaving what happened there. When the wind comes up and rushes through the cottonwoods behind the bunkhouse, the sound carries a texture that makes me think of radio static. Sometimes, standing alone in a pen with moonlight bright enough to read by, I feel that old obligation rise in me, the one that kept me in Kansas when other men went chasing money and cities. The urge to hold the line, to fix the fence, to make order out of trouble. It's a good instinct. It's also how people get pulled under. In the spring after I moved, I stopped by a thrift store in town to buy a coffee mug that wasn't chipped, and a jacket that didn't smell like bleach. On a rack near the back, buried under Carhartts and camo and church suits that had done their last work, I saw a green jacket, the same waxy material, the same cut, the same shade of tired army. My hands moved toward it without asking me. When my fingers met the fabric, it was just cloth, not the jacket, not even close. But my heart was hammering like someone had slammed the barn door just behind me. I still talk to the Callahans sometimes. Nora texts pictures of new calves, all legs and ears, and indignation at being cold. Eli sent me a photo of the sunset over the north pasture last week. The sky looked like it was on fire, and the land beneath it like water. Once Connor asked if I'd come home in a year or 2. I told him I didn't know. The truth is, I do know. I won't go back. Not because of ghosts, because of people. Because I can't keep passing that kitchen window knowing what's been fixed and what hasn't. Because if Lydia had shown up one more time and I'd opened the door, I don't know what version of the story you'd be reading now. Sometimes I wonder if handing her the truck keys would have rerouted the night. Maybe she would have been halfway to Colorado when the sirens wailed past my driveway and the deputies came knocking. Maybe James would have died anyway. Maybe I would have been the one found in a ditch 3 miles from home. Paranoia invents crossroads with perfect exits, but life leaves you standing on the shoulder, watching taillights disappear into the dark. A month ago, I woke at 3:17 a.m., the green digits on the bunkhouse wall clock too bright in the dark, and I could swear I heard a distant whisper of static, like a radio tuned between stations. I got up, pulled on boots, and walked out into the yard. The mountains hunched against the horizon like sleeping animals. The cottonwoods rubbed their dry hands together. Somewhere a coyote yipped, then went quiet. I stood there until the chills soaked through my sweatshirt, and my breath smoked out of me in clouds. Nothing moved, nothing came. I went back inside and lay awake until the window brightened. Then I got up and went to work. You don't get to stop because the past taps your shoulder. The waterers still freeze. The feed still has to be hauled. The calves still come when they come, and they don't care who you used to be. People sometimes ask, do you think Lydia meant to kill him? It's the wrong question. Intention gets messy when the mind collapses under the weight it wasn't built to carry. She believed she was saving herself from poison and wires and a government made of shadows. She believed it enough to pull a trigger and then swing the butt of a rifle until the world went quiet. On paper, that makes her a murderer. In the air between us, where all the rest of it hangs, the years, the grief, the chemistry of a brain, nothing is that clean. Another question I get, less often, do you hate her? I don't. Sometimes I hate what she chose, and sometimes I hate what chose her. But I don't hate her. I hate the list. I hate my name folded into a damp square with 4 others and no explanation. I hate that the scrap made me look over my shoulder even when I changed the landscape around me. Hate is a stick you carry that grows heavier the longer you hold it. I set it down when I can. In Wyoming, there's a day in late September when summer gives up all at once. You can feel it in the way the light stops lingering and the birds go quiet at dusk. The cattle lift their heads and test the wind like they're reading a note. It's the hinge in the year, and if you stand still long enough, you can feel it swing under your feet. That day came and went this year. I noticed it. I kept working anyway. I still keep the doors locked at night. Old habits, new place. If footsteps ever come down the gravel and pause outside the barn, I'll be ready in the only ways that matter. Eyes open, mind clear, the part of me that stays level when something tries to tip it. But most nights, all I hear is wind through cottonwoods and the soft, steady sound of animals breathing, ordinary life holding its line. If you're looking for a moral, I don't have one. The land gives and takes. People do too. Sometimes the only mercy you get is the kind you give yourself. A clean break, a long drive, a porch facing east, so you can drink your coffee and let the sun tell you that for this one morning at least, you made it through. And sometimes the mercy is smaller than that. It's simply knowing that when a girl in a green jacket shows up in your doorway smelling like iron and fear, there are no right answers. Only the old maps. Lock the door, make the call, keep breathing until dawn. After that, you go where the road lets you and hope the past is not a caravan built to follow. I still think about the Mortons, about James's porch light burning down to nothing and then finally going out, about Aunt Nancy's handkerchief, about Eleanor's whisper at the register like we were sharing state secrets, about the night cows shifted in their pens and somewhere beyond the corn a siren began to sing. I left Kansas because I didn't want to live in the echo of that sound anymore. But the echo lives in me, and on nights when the wind turns and the radio of the sky crackles just right, I hear it again. Not loud, not even close, just enough to remind me that the worst things we survive are never fully past. They live at the edge of the field, just beyond the last fence post, waiting for us to notice or not. So I don't look too hard. I go to work. I come home. I keep my name to myself unless someone needs it. And in the morning, when the first light touches the pasture and the world seems briefly brand new, I stand there with my coffee and let the sun do what it always does. Start over, without asking permission, burning everything sharp into something softer. Somewhere in Kansas, a kitchen window looks out over a square of plywood that sits where linoleum used to be. A porch light has finally been turned off. A field that once stank of rot has been plowed under and seeded again. And if the rain cooperates, the new rows will rise. People will pretend to forget. The land will not. It remembers everything you ask it to carry, and it keeps the books better than any court. I could tell you I'm at peace. That would be a lie, but I'm not running either. I'm working. I'm sleeping when I can. And on certain afternoons in late October when the wind is dry and the sky is a hard, brilliant blue, I let myself believe that the sound I hear is just leaves and wire and not the whisper of a radio in a house that's no longer mine. Maybe that's all any of us get. Not answers, not absolution, just a moment on a porch, facing east, another cup of coffee, and the faith that if we keep our heads down and our hearts steady, we can make it to the next morning without anything else breaking. And if we can't, well then we do what Plains people have always done. We fix what's fixable. We mark what isn't. We say the names that need saying and fold the rest into the quiet. We watch the fields change color, and we listen to the wind, and we teach ourselves, again and again, how to walk back into our barns without flinching. I don't know what became of Lydia beyond the sentence, beyond the orange jumpsuit and the nod she gave me like a benediction or a curse. Maybe she prays. Maybe she sleeps. Maybe she learned the trick of stopping a thought before it spirals, counting the ceiling tiles, naming state capitals, watching pigeons outside a razor wire fence until their bodies make more sense than her own. I hope she's alive. I hope she forgives herself, if that's even possible. As for me, I keep my tools clean. I keep my word. I keep my doors locked. And when I hear the wind drag its fingers through the cottonwoods, I go still and listen until the sound resolves into what it always was, the world continuing, with or without me, with or without Kansas, with or without a green jacket and a list of names crumpled in a pocket. Then I breathe out and get back to work, because the sun is coming up. And whether I deserve it or not, morning is here.